The sun dipped low over the vast desert, casting a golden hue upon the towering spires of the Sheikh's palace. Inside the opulent halls, shimmering with gold leaf and delicate Persian carpets, the billionaire Sheikh stood rigid, his dark eyes piercing the intricate puzzle laid before him. "No one can unlock its secret," he declared, voice echoing through the marble corridors, a testament to his unyielding pride and unchallenged intellect. The palace smelled of rich oud and exotic spices, a sensory tapestry weaving luxury and tradition. Light flickered softly from crystal chandeliers, casting shadows that danced across walls adorned with gems and silks finer than any could imagine. Yet beneath this lavish grandeur, a quiet current of tension stirred. Unbothered by the flaunting of power above her, a humble figure moved steadily through the marble halls. The cleaner, unnoticed and unsung, carried her basket with careful grace. Dust motes twirled in the shafts of sun as she tidied without haste, her eyes sharp and serene, holding a wisdom born from simplicity rather than titles. Her world was one of silence and shadows, a place where no one expected to find answers. Meanwhile, the Sheikh's thoughts churned, stirred by weeks of frustration. 20 world-renowned experts, each confident and arrogant, had attempted and failed his fiendish puzzle. Their pride shattered, they withdrew one after another, but the Sheikh's challenge remained undefeated, until now. He scoffed inwardly at their incompetence, sure that none could surpass his own cunning. Yet today, something shifted. The cleaner paused near the grand puzzle, her gaze lingering on the complex shapes and cryptic symbols. Her fingers traced a subtle pattern, not with learned calculation, but with instinct. The room, thick with disbelief and curiosity, seemed to hold its breath as she moved quietly, unassuming yet resolute. Their eyes met, his a storm of disbelief and latent suspicion, hers steady and unflinching. He lowered his gaze to watch her work, barely daring to hope. Time slipped away, then with the gentlest touch, the cleaner completed the puzzle with stunning ease. The impossible unlocked by simple hands, intuition outmatching every expert's pride. The air thickened with shock, the silence shattered by a breathless gasp from the Sheikh himself. For the first time, a flicker of admiration pierced his icy armor, and doubt crept in. Could true genius really hide beneath humility? His world, built on power and intellect, trembled as old certainties crumbled. She turned to him, not with arrogance, but with quiet strength that challenged every preconception he held. The shattered illusion forced the Sheikh to confront a troubling truth. Intelligence and worth were far deeper than opulence or title. This moment, fragile and electric, held the promise of a transformation neither could yet name. Before the next secret of this majestic palace is unveiled, make sure you're part of our caravan of stories. Many fates are still to be shaped, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave your like if the heart of this billionaire Sheikh already intrigues you. Tell me in the comments, from which part of the world are you following this saga, and what twist do you think is coming? Your passion for these dramas inspires us to go on. Thank you for being with us. The cleaner's hands trembled ever so slightly, betraying the calm she wore like a mantle. The puzzle clicked into place with a final, almost inaudible whisper of triumph. Around them, the vast hall seemed to hold its breath, the shimmering chandeliers flickering, as if reflecting the sudden shift that had unsettled the very air. The Billionaire Sheikh, whose pride had towered as imperiously as the palace itself, now stood rooted in disbelief, unsure whether to scowl or admire. His dark eyes bore into her, searching beyond the surface of her humble silence. Who was this woman who dared to cross the boundaries that none other had breached? The palace had been an unyielding fortress of intellect and power, until this moment, when simplicity and instinct had undone his meticulously crafted enigma. "She completed it," he murmured, voice cracked with a mix of incredulity and reluctant awe. "With nothing but her hands. No diagrams, no formula, just this." He gestured at the now opened puzzle, a hidden compartment, revealed beneath its orchestration of ancient symbols. The cleaner lifted her gaze, meeting his stare with a steady calm that unsettled him more than any scream or plea ever could. In that gaze, the sheikh glimpsed an unspoken defiance, wrapped in quiet dignity. Not a challenger hungry for power, but a soul unbroken by the vast gulf that separated their worlds. A knight's concession, unspoken yet unmistakable, passed between them. This moment would forever mark a fracture in the sheikh's impeccable world. A subtle, almost dangerous acknowledgement that brilliance wore many faces. He stepped closer, the scent of oud and leather mingling in the tense space between them. His voice was softer now, laced with a curiosity he could barely contain. "What is your name?" She hesitated, a flicker of surprise crossing her features. Not many dared address her directly in the grand halls of sapphire and gold. "Layla," she answered, voice low but unwavering. "Layla." The name tasted foreign, yet somehow right upon his tongue. "I am Faisal." His title felt hollow in comparison, the weight of his identity suddenly less certain. "You've undone what 20 experts could not." Layla inclined her head with a pause that was equal parts deference and quiet strength. "Sometimes the keys are hidden in what others overlook," she said softly. Faisal's pulse quickened, not from anger or frustration, but from something unfamiliar. Intrigue mingled with respect. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps shattered the fragile silence. A tall figure emerged, one of the sheikh's most trusted advisors, eyes wide with alarm. "My sheikh, pardons, there is urgent news from the southern borders. A caravan carrying precious artifacts has been ambushed. Some survivors speak of betrayal." Faisal's jaw tightened. His world was perilously balanced, every move a dance on the edge of chaos. He turned back to Layla, the gleam in his dark eyes sharper now. Here, in the heart of his palace, amid puzzles and secrets, new games had already begun. "Come with me," he commanded, though there was no question in his tone. As they walked through the vast corridors adorned with golden crescents and ornate mosaics, Layla felt a spark of something she had no name for, the quiet thrill of stepping into a world that had always been closed to her, yet now beckoned with the promise of change. Faisal's gait was deliberate, powerful. each step echoing like a drumbeat, heralding fate. He glanced sideways, as if weighing a decision, and then his voice softened. "You showed courage today, Layla. That gift may be needed again soon." The air between them crackled with tension, unspoken histories pressing against fresh beginnings. Reaching the war room, they found a cluster of men and women gathered around a vast map. The flickering lantern light cast eerie shadows, reflecting the urgency that gripped the place. Faisal's advisor stepped forward, speaking rapidly of traitors hidden within their ranks, whispering of alliances shattered as easily as glass, betrayals that cut deeper than any dagger. Layla's eyes narrowed. Amidst the swirling plots, she sensed an echo of the hidden labyrinth she had just solved. Another puzzle of lives and loyalties, waiting to be unraveled. Faisal's gaze found hers. In that glance, the fortress of his pride cracked slightly, revealing a man burdened not only by power, but by doubt. He paced slowly to the center of the room, voice low but commanding. "This palace may hold secrets, but the real threat hides in shadows beyond these walls. We must act swiftly." Layla's heart thundered. This was no longer the quiet life she knew. It was a tempest demanding strength she had yet to prove. Faisal turned back to the puzzle she solved. "You see the answers where others see only riddles. Perhaps there is more I must learn from you." She met his eyes, steady, unflinching, an unvoiced promise of challenges to come. From the high balcony, moonlight poured down like liquid silver, washing over the palace and desert beyond. The oasis of stability was fragile, and beneath its calm surface, currents twisted toward inevitable upheaval. A servant hurried in, whispering something urgent into Faisal's ear. His face darkened, shadowed by a revelation that chilled him to the bone. Without a word, he strode to the window, gaze lost in the endless sands. The desert held many secrets, but none as dangerous as the one now threatening to unravel his carefully ordered world. Turning abruptly, his voice cut through the thick night air. "Someone close to me has betrayed everything I stand for." The weight of those words hung heavy. Layla felt the ground shift beneath her, the promise of a new battle, not only for survival, but for the very soul of the Sheikh's empire. In the silence that followed, their eyes locked, a silent pact forged in a heart of opulence and danger. And just as the desert winds whispered of coming storms, the door behind them creaked slightly open. A shadow slipped through, unheard, unseen, but deadly. The game had only just begun. The night deepened, wrapping the palace in a velvet cloak interspersed with shimmering stars. Within the war room, the flickering lanterns cast wavering shadows, tracing the worry etched into every face. Faisal stood at the helm, the weight of betrayal heavy on his broad shoulders. The walls, steeped in centuries of history, seemed to close in, whispering secrets of loyalty and deceit. Layla's gaze did not waver. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the ornate table, as the advisor recounted reports of traitors mingled among them. Closest confidants, whispers of a conspiracy deep enough to shake the very foundation of the Sheikh's empire. The nets of fate that had long enfolded this realm suddenly felt frayed, vulnerable. A sudden chill brushed along Layla's spine. the echo of the shadow that had slipped behind the door just moments ago, still haunting the edges of her mind. The palace was no longer a sanctuary of glittering illusions, but a battlefield of unseen enemies. Faisal's voice dropped as he turned to her, the piercing intensity in his dark eyes seeming to strip away all pretense. Layla, you stepped into my world today and unraveled mysteries no one else could. I must ask, do you understand what's at stake now? She met his gaze, unblinking and quiet, the courage in her eyes defying centuries of hierarchy. I may not come from your world, she said softly, but I see its fractures, and I know that the strongest walls are breached not by force, but by the choices of those within. A slow nod passed between them, fragile but irrevocable. Together, they were no longer merely Sheikh and Cleaner, but allies confronting a storm threatening to swallow all. The air thickened when the grand doors burst open. A young messenger, breathless and trembling, staggered inside, clutching a sealed scroll. He spoke breathlessly of a dark caravan, treasures lost, loyal guards slain, and a whispered name carried on desperate lips. A name that sent a cold tremor through Faisal's core. Zafir, Faisal muttered, his jaw clenching so tightly that the fine line of pain beneath his skin sharpened. The name belonged to his most trusted brother, the very man who had sworn to shield the empire. Yet now, shadowed in betrayal, he stood accused of orchestrating the ambush. Layla's heart slammed against her ribs. She watched Faisal's normally imperious facade crack, the storm behind his eyes raging with confusion and grief. How could one so close turn into an enemy so great? Faisal stepped away from the table, pacing near the windows that framed the endless desert. Moonlight washed over him, bathing the contours of his face in pale silver, as if illuminating the very torment within. Each breath he took seemed labored, as if the weight of his crown bore down not only upon his head, but his soul. I trusted him, he whispered hoarsely, voice barely carrying over the soft desert wind. Zafir, what's supposed to be my brother, in blood and bond. If this is true, if my own blood has poisoned the veins of my empire. His words faltered, swallowed by the cavernous room. Layla stepped forward, her voice steady yet tender. The loyalty of one man will never destroy the courage of those who stand for justice. Her eyes bore into his, fierce and unwavering. We will uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous, no matter the cost. Faisal exhaled sharply, the tension crackling between them like static. A fragile trust began to weave itself through the space. Tentative, uncertain, but real. Layla, you carry more than just the hands that solved my impossible puzzle, he said, voice low and rough with emotion. I do not know if I am ready to trust again, but I am willing to try. The flicker of vulnerability in his gaze caught her breath. The raw honesty of a man fighting his own demons beneath the mantle of power. Suddenly, the sharp echo of a footstep halted the fragile moment. Both turned sharply, eyes scanning the room. The servant who'd whispered news earlier now stood frozen at the threshold, face pale as ash. "There's been another breach," he stammered. "In the eastern wing. The vault. Someone has entered. They stole nothing, but left a mark." His trembling hand pointed toward the charred symbol scorched into the marble, the emblem of a forgotten rival clan, a potent warning. A shadow darkened Faisal's expression. His hand clenched the edge of the window frame, knuckles whitening. "They are no longer hiding," he whispered. "They are sending a message." Layla's breath hitched. The quiet palace now pulsed with threats and secrets far more tangled than any puzzle she had solved. It was a game of shadows and knives, and they stood in the center, exposed and vulnerable. The gulf between their worlds shrank in that charged silence, his empire on the brink, her courage unmasking strength neither had dared to imagine before. Faisal turned, his gaze igniting with the fierce spark that had first drawn Layla's eyes. "This betrayal cuts deeper than I feared, but it is also an opportunity to find who we truly are beneath the masks we wear." She nodded, a silent promise passing between them. From the blackened corridors beyond, a slow, deliberate movement slipped through, silent footsteps that belonged to neither friend nor foe, but a shadow born of the palace's deepest secrets. The unseen enemy watched, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And in that breathless instant, the game's true peril revealed itself. In a world built on trust, the greatest threat was the one closest to the throne. The night had deepened into an unyielding black veil, swallowing the palatial halls in shadows that seemed alive, whispering threats, promises, and hidden truths. Faisal stood rigid by the towering window, the moonlight outlining his angular jaw and the furrow etched into his brow. His dark eyes, so accustomed to command and certainty, now shimmered with storm cloud uncertainty. The weight of betrayal, his own blood's treachery, pressed heavy on him, suffocating in its implication. Layla remained by the edge of the ornate war table, her fingers lingering over the map as if drawing strength from the very ink. The torchlight flickered, casting tremulous shapes over her calm face, betraying none of the turmoil brewing beneath. She had faced the impossible puzzle and won, not with power or prestige, but with intuition woven from years of quiet endurance. Now the pieces scattered before them were not just of stone and symbol, but of loyalty and lies. "Zephyr," Faisal whispered, again, tasting the name like a poison. "My own brother, the man I trusted without question." His voice cracked, a rare fracture in the fortress of his pride. "How deep does this betrayal reach? How many others wear the mask of loyalty while hiding daggers in their hands?" Layla met his gaze, unwavering and steady. "Trust is fragile, Your Highness, like crystal, beautiful until it shatters. But it is also the thread that weaves an empire's soul." She paused, voice soft but fierce. "Your enemies are no longer only outside these walls. The danger festers within." The air thickened with unspoken tension, neither willing to let the other's resolve falter. Yet beneath the composed surface, both knew the palace was no longer sanctuary, but a battlefield, every step shadowed by unseen eyes and whispering knives. Suddenly, a soft rustle echoed from the far end of the chamber. Both turned sharply, hearts pounding. The vast room seemed to close in, the crackling lanterns flickering like fearful spirits. A slender figure emerged from the darkness, the palace's head of security, Khalid, his usually stern face pale and drawn. He approached swiftly, his voice a harsh whisper. "My sheikh, another breach. The eastern vault has been compromised. Nothing taken, but a mark left behind." Faisal's eyes narrowed as Khalid unfurled a scroll, revealing an image scorched into the marble floor. A symbol only a few remembered, a sigil of the Al-Hashim clan. A name that carried centuries of whispered vengeance. "The Al-Hashim," Faisal muttered. His fingers clenched the window ledge until his knuckles blanched white. They thought this empire was built on sand and wind, ready to crumble. Layla stepped closer, breath shallow but steady. "Their warning is clear," she said. "They don't need to steal treasures. They want to fracture your rule, intimidate those who remain loyal." Faisal exhaled long and slow, the moonlight tracing the scars his doubts etched upon his face. Every fortress has its cracks. Every king his vulnerabilities. This is no longer a game of intellect and riddles. It is war on all fronts. A faint, almost imperceptible clatter came from the shadows. Both turned again, eyes sharp, scanning every corner. The silence that followed was suffocating, as they waited for the next move the enemy might make. In that fraught stillness, Faisal's gaze softened as he looked at Layla, the woman who had entered his world uninvited, armed only with courage and an indomitable spirit. "This palace has kept its secrets well," he said quietly. "But tonight, I realize some secrets must be shared, not guarded." Layla offered a small, knowing smile, the fire in her eyes dancing even in the low light. "Then let us be the ones to shatter those walls together." Their hands brushed, a fleeting touch filled with unspoken promise and burgeoning trust. Here, in the heart of opulence and treachery, an alliance was forged, fragile, fierce, and unforgettable. Faisal's voice lowered, a guttural vow beneath the swirling uncertainty. "We will root out the traitors, no matter the cost. But you must understand, Layla. This path will weigh heavily on us both." A chill crept through the vast chamber as an unexpected chill wind swept through a half-open door. The heavy curtains shivered, revealing a slender blade, just a gleam, but unmistakably real. Layla's hand shot out, gripping Faisal's arm, her eyes wide with warning. Before either could react further, a shadow detached itself smoothly from the darkness. A figure cloaked in midnight, face obscured, but movements precise and calculated. Faisal's instincts ignited. He stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "Show yourself." The figure's only answer was a cold smile before a folded note was tossed at their feet. It landed on the polished marble with a whisper. Layla bent swiftly, unfolding the parchment. Her breath caught. Words scrawled in elegant, cruel script revealed a secret so explosive it threatened to unravel everything Faisal held dear. "Not all shadows belong to your enemies. The true dagger lies closest to your throne." Faisal's eyes burned with a tempestuous combination of rage and despair. He turned toward Layla, his voice barely a whisper, but thunderous in its weight. "We have been deceived." A distant clock struck midnight. its chimes echoing like a judge's verdict through the palace halls. Outside, the desert wind howled, carrying with it the promise of a reckoning. The game had escalated beyond puzzles and betrayals to something darker, a test of loyalty, love, and survival. And as Faisal's hand clenched tighter around the note, a single question burned fiercer than any flame in the desert night. Who among those he trusts will deliver the final, fatal blow? The weight of the note felt like a stone sinking deep into Faisal's chest, every letter a jagged shard of betrayal that threatened to sunder the fragile trust beginning to form. His eyes, dark and stormy, locked onto Layla's steady gaze. A mix of defiance and determination mirrored back at him. The palace no longer felt like a home. It was an arena where shadows wore familiar faces, and every whispered word could be a lie. Faisal's fingers tightened around the edges of the parchment, his knuckles pale under the moon's cold light. Who can I trust when the traitor may be closer than my own heart dares? To hope? His voice barely rose above a haunted whisper, the admission of doubt, a wound few had ever seen. Layla stepped closer, the air between them alive with unspoken resolve. Her hand brushed his, a fleeting touch filled with the promise that they were no longer alone in this perilous storm. We will find the truth, no matter the cost, even if it means unmasking those we hold dear. Her words hung in the thick silence, a vow sworn beneath the glittering chandeliers. A delicate scent of jasmine wafted through the chamber as the heavy doors creaked open again. This time, a figure stepped inside without hesitation, a woman draped in midnight blue silk, her eyes sharp and calculating. Her entrance sliced through the tension, like a dagger. "Forgive my intrusion," she said, voice smooth, yet edged with something unreadable. "But I bring news that will either bind you together or shred your fragile alliance." Faisal's gaze narrowed, instinctively reaching for the seat of power at the table. "Speak." The woman unfolded a second scroll, voice low and precise. "Zafir is not the only one whose loyalty wavers. There is a faction within the palace itself, whispers of an ancient grudge, a vendetta carried through generations, aiming to dismantle your reign from the inside." Layla's eyes flared, every muscle tensing as the pieces of an insidious puzzle began to align. The mark scorched into the marble was no random threat. It was a signal, a harbinger of chaos rooted deep in blood and history. Faisal's jaw clenched, the stubborn pride battling with the growing realization that his kingdom was crumbling from within. "We have enemies wearing the masks of friends. This war is woven into the very fabric of my family." The woman's gaze flicked between them knowingly. "And time is not on your side." As she turned to leave, a subtle movement caught Layla's eye, a flash of gold hidden beneath her sleeve, a sign no one would expect. Suspicion rippled through the room like an electric current. Could the messenger herself be the shadow that haunted the palace? Before Faisal could voice his doubt, a sudden shout echoed from the hallway. Guards rushed in, breathless and wide-eyed. "My sheikh, there's been another breach, this time in the Western Archives." The attackers left behind a message carved into the ancient stone, words that condemn those who silence the past. Faisal's heart tightened, the threat now omnipresent and deeply personal. Every secret, every betrayal woven into the palace walls seemed to pulse with renewed menace. Layla gripped the edge of the table, her mind racing. Her humble past had never prepared her for this labyrinth of treachery, yet here, amidst silk and gold, she was more alive than ever. Each step beside Faisal was a journey into shadows neither could escape. Faisal's voice broke the charged silence, rough with the promise of war and reckoning. We will root out the traitors, even if it means burning down the very foundations we built. But first, Layla, you must understand the cost. Her eyes met his, unwavering. I have already paid mine. A sudden crash sounded from the high balcony above them. They turned just in time to see a figure disappear into the night, a silent silhouette stalking the moonlit terraces, leaving behind a chilling echo of deadly intent. Faisal's gaze stabbed the darkness beyond the windows, haunted and fierce. The storm is here, and it comes from within. Layla's breath faltered. The fragile alliance between them, now tested by invisible enemies and whispered treasons. Yet beneath the fear, a fierce resolve burned. Whatever secrets the night held, they would confront them together. As the palace settled into an uneasy quiet, the note crumpled now lay heavy between them, a brutal reminder that in a world built on loyalty and lies, the deepest wounds were those inflicted by the hands closest at heart. And then, from the shadows, where no light dared to linger, a cold, unmistakable laugh drifted, a voice belonging to none they trusted and all feared. The game had become far deadlier than either had imagined. The true betrayal was only just beginning. The flickering lanterns trembled, casting distorted shadows that clung desperately to the marble walls. Faisal's fingers still clenched tight around the crumpled note. The chilling words, printed in cruel, elegant script, searing themselves into his memory. His dark eyes sought Layla's steady gaze, searching for strength he wasn't sure he possessed tonight. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, until Layla's quiet voice cut through the stillness. We cannot fight shadows with fear, nor secrets with silence. He nodded slowly, the weight of his crown pressing harder against the raw wound betrayal had opened. This palace once symbolized my absolute dominion. Now, every smile, every whispered conversation feels like a threat. Layla stepped closer, the scent of jasmine mingling with the rich oud that clung to the air. Her fingers grazed the edge of the war table, ornate carvings of desert roses and swirling dunes, before curling into a fist. Trust is a fragile thread, Faisal, but even the most tangled webs can be unraveled if we confront them together. Her words stirred something in him. For the first time since the revelation, a flicker of hope dared to ignite beneath his storm-clouded gaze. The heavy doors groaned open once more, and the faint rustle of silk echoed down the chamber as a figure slipped inside. This time, it was Khalid, the head of security, his usually stern features marked with fatigue and urgency. He carried an ancient scroll, a symbol burned into its fold, a dark sign none wished to see. This mark Khalid began, voice terse, belong to the Al-Hashim clan, a rival family, thought extinguished for generations. Its appearance here means the war has come home. Faisal's jaw tightened, the only sign of melting resolve. The Al-Hashims were ghosts, whispers of a vendetta carved through ages. That their symbol now stained his palace sent a primal fear racing through his chest. Layla's eyes narrowed, the puzzle pieces turning deep in her mind. Their aim is clear, to destabilize, to fracture the alliances that hold this empire together. The air between them thickened, opulence and danger intertwined like twin serpents coiling around the columns. Faisal felt vulnerable beneath the sharp glint in Layla's eyes, her quiet strength illuminating corners where he had long feared to look. He strode to the towering windows overlooking the endless desert, moonlight tracing the angles of his face like a healing balm and a cold reminder all at once. I must protect this realm, even if it means burning it to ash. Her hand found his arm, light but unwavering. Then let us be the fire whose flames purify, not destroy. Sudden clatter shattered the moment, steel ringing against marble as guards burst through the corridors. One, breathless and pale, knelt before Faisal and Layla, his words tumbling out frantic and urgent. My sheikh, more intruders, this time in the Western archives. They left behind a message, carved deep into the stone. Those who silence the past shall answer for it. Faisal's breath hitched, memories of long-buried family secrets itching beneath the surface of his mind. The past was no longer silent. It fought back, his dark eyes locked with Layla's. Amidst the threat and intrigue, a tether of trust began to form, fragile and new, yet tangible. We are no longer merely sheikh and servant, Faisal said, voice low but fierce. Tonight we are allies, bound by necessity and honesty. Her lips curved in a fleeting smile. Allies who see beyond titles and masks. The distant echo of footsteps drew their attention toward the high balcony windows. Silhouetted against the moonlit sky, a lone figure slipped away with a predator's grace. The chill creeping down Faisal's spine was undeniable. The storm approaches, he whispered, voice brittle but resolute. Layla's hand tightened around his, fingers digging into silk and skin alike. And we will face it, together. The palace walls, once sanctuaries of grandeur and tradition, now harbored enemies, cloaked in familiar faces and secret smiles. Every whispered conversation, every shadowed glance, now carried the weight of suspicion. Faisal's gaze darkened as he spoke. There is more than one dagger poised toward my heart. Her brow furrowed, the fire in her eyes unwavering. Then we must seek the truth among those closest to your throne, even if it shatters everything. A cold laugh echoed faintly from the dark recesses of the hall, a sound neither human nor fully mortal, a cruel symphony that promised the coming descent into a deeper abyss. The note in Faisal's hand trembled, the final line burning hotter than any flame. The true dagger lies closest to your throne. Their eyes met. No words needed. The battle had moved beyond puzzles and riddles. It was now a war of loyalty, love, and survival. And within the walls, gilded in gold and shadow, a traitor smiled quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. the palace lay heavy with silence in the wake of the latest breach. Shadows clinging like whispers that dared not flee. Faisal stood near the window, the desert moon casting sharp edges upon his stern profile. His eyes, usually so resolute and commanding, roamed the empty halls uneasily, as if searching for an unseen enemy lurking just beyond reach. Layla's presence beside him was steady, a quiet anchor amidst the storm. Her gaze flicked between the scorch-marked emblem on the floor and the ominous darkness just beyond the heavy doors. Her fingers clenched into a fist, the weight of what lay ahead pressing against her bones. Faisal finally broke the silence, voice low, but loaded with an almost unbearable fatigue. The Al-Hashim clan does not attack out of desperation. They strike because they believe this empire can break. She met his gaze, the fire in her eyes stronger even than the flames that had seared the marble. It is not the empire alone they seek to shatter, but the legacy, the foundation built on blood and sacrifice. The words hung between them, thick as the intoxicating scent of oud that filled the air. An invisible reminder that power here was as much curse as blessing. Faisal stepped away from the window, pacing through the grand hall with measured tension. Each footfall echoed like a drumbeat warning of an impending battle no sword could win alone. And now, the poison runs deeper, he said, voice rough. The note, it speaks of betrayal, closer than any of us dared imagine. A dagger from within. Layla swallowed the sudden tightness in her throat. Then the enemy wears a face we've trusted, one who moves silently among us. A cold wind swept through the hall, stirring the heavy silk drapes like whispers of ghosts past. It was impossible to tell if the chill was from the desert night or from the fear that had taken root in their hearts. Suddenly, the distant clatter of footsteps broke the tension. They turned sharply as the heavy doors burst open once more. Khalid entered, his face pale but resolute, clutching an ancient scroll marked with unfamiliar glyphs. His dark eyes darted between Faisal and Layla, weighed down by news too grave to speak freely. "There's been another intrusion," Khalid said, voice hesitant. "This time in the northern chapel, the invaders left behind this." He unfurled the scroll carefully, revealing a faded insignia entwined with a serpent, a symbol whispered about in secret histories, tied to a shadowed faction long thought extinguished. Faisal's jaw tightened until the line of his lips vanished beneath the shadow of his beard. The betrayal is not only in blood, but in the very whispers of ancient grudges. Layla stepped forward, every nerve alive with the urgency of their crumbling world. "We are being hunted from within and without. The palace is no longer home. It is a battlefield littered with secrets and unseen knives." The two stood side by side, fortress and flame, power and humility, bound by a fragile thread of trust. Their unlikely alliance, forged in desperation, now faced a test harsher than either had anticipated. Faisal's voice dropped, edged with a vulnerability that startled him as much as it pierced the air. "Layla, you entered this world by chance, but now you are entwined in its fate. Can you bear the weight? The price of loyalty here is steep." Her hands found his, fingers gripping with surprising strength. "I have no fear of the cost," only of living without fighting for what is right. A tense silence settled, broken only by the distant, haunting echo of a single bell tolling midnight, an ancient warning etched into the fabric of the kingdom's soul. From the shadows beyond, a whisper slithered, soft, deliberate, and laced with menace. The presence was unmistakable. Someone watched, waited, and prepared to strike under the veil of darkness. Suddenly, a soft rustle caught their attention. A silhouette detached itself from the dim corridor, gliding as silently as a desert wind. The glint of a dagger flashed in the moonlight, a deadly promise born of betrayal. Faisal's instinct roared to life. "Show yourself!" His voice cracked like thunder, yet the figure only smiled, a smile cold and void of mercy. Before either could react, the figure tossed a small, folded parchment onto the marble floor and vanished into the depths of the palace like a shadow swallowed whole. Layla bent swiftly to retrieve the note, her breath caught in her throat as she unfolded it with trembling hands. The words burned with cruel precision. Not all betrayal is born from strangers. The final blow will come from the heart closest to the throne. Faisal's eyes flamed with a volatile storm. Rage, despair, betrayal. But beneath it all, a flicker of grim resolve hardened his gaze. He turned to Layla, voice low, heavy with bitter truth. "We have been deceived by one they call family." She met his look without flinching. "Then we will unmask the traitor before they can deliver the fatal strike." The grand hall seemed to exhale, the heavy air momentarily shattered by the weight of their unspoken pact. Outside, the desert winds howled like a chorus heralding war, as if even the earth itself sensed the coming tempest. And somewhere, in the silent corridors of the palace, cloaked in darkness and lies, the true betrayer watched, smiling, waiting, ready to consummate the ruin they had sworn to bring. The game had entered its deadliest phase. The fragile silence that had settled in the war room shattered like glass when the heavy doors groaned open once more, revealing a figure swathed in twilight shadows. The woman's steps were measured, deliberate, each movement speaking of command beneath the delicate veil of silk and jewels. Her eyes, sharp and cold as desert stars, locked onto Faisal's with an intensity that sent a shiver crawling up his spine. "You were expecting this, weren't you?" Her voice was a velvet-edged blade, slicing through the thick air of tension. Faisal's jaw clenched, his grip tightening on the edge of the carved ivory table. Layla's eyes narrowed, sensing the electric charge that neither spoke aloud, but both felt deep in their bones. The game was far from over. "The pieces are falling, but the picture still eludes us," the woman continued, her gaze flicking toward Layla, who stood unwavering, the scent of jasmine and determination entwined like armor. "You think the betrayal ends with blood, but the roots run deeper, twisted and ancient." Faisal's voice was low, bearing the weight of a man caught between honor and despair. "Then tell me truthfully, who among us wears the mask of loyalty while husbanding the dagger beneath?" The woman smiled, a slow, cruel curve of lips that held no warmth. "Truth is a luxury you cannot afford. Look to the throne's shadow. There the knife is sharpened by trust, not hate. His dark eyes flicked momentarily to Layla, recognition sparking in his gaze. She had been his untouched unknown, the one who solved riddles unseen by scholars and whispered secrets. But now she stood entangled in a web woven from danger and deception. Footsteps approached swiftly, breaking the tension. Khalid, the head of security, entered, breath ragged, eyes wide. "My sheikh." Another report, this time from the southern servants' quarters. Strange voices, shadows slipping between corridors. They say the palace itself listens and watches. Thazal's breath caught. The opulent fortress that once exuded control, now brimmed with vulnerability. Each echo was a threat, every whisper a summons to war. Layla stepped forward, voice steady as leather-bound steel. "We are no longer playing with riddles. This is survival. Your empire, your family is under siege, not just by outsiders, but by those who wear your blood like a cloak." The tension between Thazal and Layla thickened, an unspoken bond forged in shared peril. The gulf between ruler and servant faded, replaced by something fragile but fierce as desert fire. Suddenly, a subtle movement in the corner caught Layla's keen eye, a glimmer of something metallic cloaked in the folds of midnight shadow. She stiffened, alert. "There," she whispered. Thazal's eyes snapped toward the darkness. "Show yourself," he commanded, voice low and unyielding. A flash of steel gleamed before vanishing into the labyrinthine halls, too quick to grasp, a phantom born of cunning and malice. His gaze hardened. "This palace has secrets yet to claim, and we are but players on a board whose rules keep shifting." Layla lifted the crumpled note from the table once more, the cruel words imprinted like a brand. "The final blow lies closest to the throne." Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the suffocating weight of inevitability. Faisal stepped closer, the scent of oud mingling with sweat and tension. His voice was rough, almost a whisper. Yet it echoed like judgment in the vaulted chamber. "I trusted blood, but blood is not always thicker than treachery." Her eyes pierced his, fierce and unyielding. "Then we hunt the shadow, hiding beneath your cloak, no matter the cost." A sudden howl of wind swept through the hall, stirring curtains and tossing loose papers like silk leaves caught in a desert storm. The moonlight flickered, and in that fleeting silver glow, Faisal saw a face. Just for a moment. A figure standing silently at the edge of the balcony, watching, waiting. A cold shiver traced the length of his spine. The palace, once a sanctuary of wealth and tradition, had become a crucible of deception. Faisal's hand closed into a fist. The knife is poised. Layla's breath hitched as she felt the pulse of something far greater than any riddle or puzzle. The brutal, desperate truth of survival. "The question," Faisal said, voice breaking the heavy stillness, "is who will deliver the final strike, and where I will stand when it falls." Descending. Into silence, the desert night pressed in, carrying secrets heavier than the gold that lined the palace walls. Somewhere, cloaked in familiar shadows, a hand trembled, ready to shape destiny with a blade buried in trust. The game had only just unleashed its deadliest player. The moon hung low, its silver light trembling against the vast palace walls, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of a night still blurred by betrayal and uncertainty. Faisal stood rigid by the grand window, the crumpled note heavy in his palm, its cruel message weighing down his very soul. Yet beside him, Layla's calm presence was a steady flame amid the darkness. The truth had pierced the heart of the empire. The final dagger was not forged by strangers in the desert, but wielded by one cloaked in kinship and trust. Faisal's chest tightened, a storm gathering behind his eyes. His brother, Zafir, once the bond that promised unbreakable loyalty, now stood at the center of a conspiracy that threatened to shatter all. With a slow exhale, Faisal turned to Layla. The fragile alliance they had forged in fire and fear had become his anchor. "We cannot falter now," he said, voice deep and resolute. "The enemy hides in blood, but so too does our strength." Layla met his gaze without hesitation. "Together, we will unmask the shadows and reclaim the light for this palace, for the people who truly believe in you." Her words were firm, layered with the quiet courage of one who had faced darkness and emerged unbroken. The halls that had echoed with whispers of treason now stirred with renewed purpose. Faisal summoned the trusted few who still stood loyal, warriors, advisors, and quiet guardians of the realm's forgotten honor. Beneath the vaulted ceilings, plans were laid with deliberate precision, each move a strike against invisible foes. But it was not just strategy that would bring salvation. It was hope. The hope that had awakened in Faisal when a simple cleaner had solved the impossible puzzle, reminding him that brilliance wore many faces, not only the gilded ones of kings and warriors. Days passed under a sky that burned fiercely with relentless sun. The palace, once a labyrinth of suspicion and cold grandeur, began to breathe anew. Faisal's gaze softened as he watched Layla walk beside him through the blooming gardens, recently hidden beneath neglect. Vibrant petals unfurling, like the fragile peace slowly threading through their hearts. When at last they confronted the traitor, it was neither with harsh wrath nor swift judgment, but with the dignity and sorrow of a man who understood the depths of human frailty. Zafir stood before them, the weight of his duplicity etched into the lines of his face. His motives were a tangled weave of ambition and broken loyalty. But Faisal chose forgiveness, not for weakness, but because true power lay in reconciliation. It is not blood that defines us, but the choices we make, Faisal declared to the gathered court. And today we choose to rebuild, stronger than before. Layla's hand found his, their fingers entwining with the simplicity of truth. The silence that followed was not hollow, but full of promise. In the weeks that settled like gentle sand, the palace blossomed into a beacon of hope. Walls once shadowed by doubt now gleamed with gold and laughter. The people, sensing the change in their ruler's heart, rallied with renewed faith. Faisal and Layla became the center of a new dawn, their bond a symbol of unity between worlds once divided by fortune and fate. One evening, beneath a sky swept with stars, Faisal led Layla to the palace's highest balcony. The desert stretched endlessly beyond. But here, in this sanctum between earth and sky, nothing else mattered. His eyes, once sharp with guarded pride, softened as he reached for her face. You showed me that true strength is humility, that honor can not just as a sun rising over dunes, but as a promise fulfilled. New blossoms unfurled in the gardens, laughter echoed through the marbled halls, and a kingdom, scarred by secrets and shadows, now stood united, bound by trust and love. Faisal and Layla stood side by side, rulers of not just an empire, but of a future forged by resilience and hope. And beneath the endless desert sky, their story closed, not with a whisper of regret, but with the triumphant song of a love that had conquered betrayal, darkness, and doubt. The game was over. The palace, once a fortress of secrets, had become a home. Together, they faced all that was to come, unbreakable and as luminous as the desert sun.